Isabella and Ethan met in college. They built an empire together. But when Isabella discovers her husband's betrayal runs deeper than infidelity, she vanishes and returns as Athena. Now, she's not just exposing lies. She's burning everything down. The bedroom looked perfect. The bed was neatly made. Morning sunlight came through the white curtains. Isabella sat on the edge of the bed holding a phone tightly. She looked calm, but something was wrong. Isabella thought, "People think my life is perfect, but it's just a show." She opened Ethan's messages. Her finger stopped on a name, IVM. She tapped the chat. The messages read, "Last night was unforgettable, face throwing a kiss. Can't wait to be alone with you again." Her hands started to shake. Then she opened a voice note. Ethan's voice played. It was soft and flirty. "I wish I could wake up next to you every morning, not her. You're the one I dream about, Ivy," he said. Isabella closed the phone. Her face didn't show sadness. It showed something stronger, anger and pain, held deep inside. Few minutes later, Isabella stood in the kitchen making coffee. Everything was clean and quiet. Sunlight came through the glass windows. Ethan walked in, wearing a suit. He kissed her cheek. "Morning, love. You're up early," Ethan said. "Couldn't sleep," Isabella said with a small smile. She gave him a cup of coffee. He took a sip. "Big day at the firm." "I'll be home late," Ethan said. "Of course. I know how busy you are," Isabella said. Ethan didn't notice the hidden meaning in her voice. He kissed her cheek again and left. The door closed. Isabella stood still, looking into the shiny coffee pot. She thought, "He lies so easily, like it's nothing. But now I know the truth." Ivy Monroe, his assistant, his lover. Flashback to 5 years ago. Young Isabella stood in a busy newsroom. Papers, sticky notes, and photos covered the walls. She looked confident and in control. Isabella thought, "Before I was a wife, I was a journalist. Brave, strong, free." Ethan and Isabella sat at a candlelit table. Ethan gave her a small box. Inside was a ring. Her eyes lit up. She smiled and said yes. They kissed. Isabella thought, "Then he asked me to marry him, and I said yes. I chose him." At the newsroom, Isabella hugged her co-workers. She signed a resignation letter. She smiled, but her eyes filled with tears as she looked at the place she loved. Isabella thought, "I gave it all up. My job, my passion, for a dream. But dreams can turn into nightmares. And love can die in silence." At night time, Isabella sat at her vanity table. The room was quiet. A photo of their wedding day sat in front of her. She picked it up. Slowly, she opened the back of the frame and hid Ethan's secret second phone inside. Isabella thought, "This isn't heartbreak. This is my wake-up call. He thinks I'm broken, but he's wrong. I'm just getting started." She turned off the light. The room went dark. In the mirror, only her face remained, calm, serious, and ready. At Isabella's study room, the room was dark and quiet. Only the laptop screen gave off a soft glow. On the screen was a checklist titled Exit Plan. Most of the boxes were already ticked: burn a phone, forged ID, withdrawal receipts, hiking permit. Isabella sat still and calm. "Death is final, unless you control the story," Isabella thought. "People don't just disappear. I left just enough for them to believe I did." She closed the laptop and placed it in a drawer. Then she walked over to a bookshelf and pushed it aside. Behind it was a small safe. She opened it and took out cash, fake IDs, and an untraceable phone. Her hands didn't shake at all. Later that night, Ethan was fast asleep in bed. Isabella stood near the window, already dressed in black. She looked at him one last time. Her eyes were empty. Then she turned away and quietly walked out. He didn't notice the silence, Isabella thought. He never does. But this time, he'll notice I'm gone. Early morning, Isabella walked alone along a foggy trail. Tall trees surrounded her. A steep cliff stood ahead. She walked to the edge and slowly knelt down. She placed her scarf, her phone, and a water bottle neatly on the ground. A hiker's tragic accident, Isabella thought. A heartbroken husband. A perfect story. Then she took off her boots and placed them near the edge too. Barefoot, she walked into the woods, disappearing into the thick fog. The next day at the police station, Detective Carla Reyes read through a report. On the board behind her was a photo of Isabella. The words next to it read, "Missing, presumed dead." Outside the station, Ethan stood in front of cameras. His eyes looked red. "Isabella was everything to me. I don't know how to go on without her, Ethan said. A tear rolled down his cheek. He lowered his head. Reporters and bystanders looked sad. He cried in front of everyone, Isabella thought. But while they watched, he was already moving Ivy into our home. The small room was dark and quiet. A single lamp lit up a desk covered in newspaper clippings. Some headlines were about Ethan's law firm. Others showed reports of political scandals. Isabella sat in front of a laptop, wearing a hoodie and glasses. Her eyes were focused. They buried a body that never existed, Isabella thought. They cried for a ghost. But I'm still here, and I'm not done. She opened a blank email. The sender name said, Athena@protonmail.com. She attached some encrypted files and clicked send. The next morning, TV screens flashed a breaking news alert. Anonymous whistleblower targets top law firm in explosive leak. Reporters ran around the office. Phones rang everywhere. At the same time, Ethan sat in his office, watching the news. His face turned pale. He looked like the ground had disappeared under him. From Isabella's hideout, Isabella sat at her desk, watching the same broadcast on her laptop. She leaned back in her chair and smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was cold, calm, satisfied. You wanted me gone, Ethan, Isabella thought. Now I am. And from the shadows, I'll burn it all down. Isabella sat at her desk, now fully changed into her secret identity, Athena. Her eyes were sharp. The kindness she once had was gone. Behind her, a big corkboard showed a web of Ethan's dirty secrets, offshore accounts, political bribes, and illegal deals. I once told the world the truth, Isabella said to herself, typing fast. But now, I use truth as my weapon. She clicked send. Dozens of encrypted files were shared with journalists, government offices, and whistleblower websites. The next day at Ethan's law firm, inside a glass conference room, Ethan stood as chaos unfolded. The senior partners shouted at each other. Phones rang without stopping. On the TV, the news headline read, Top law firm under investigation for fraud and insider trading. One partner shouted, These leaks are killing us. This info is too detailed. It had to come from someone inside. Ethan looked pale. We've been hacked, he said. I'll take care of it. Just then, his phone buzzed. It was an email from Athena@protonmail.com. He opened it. The message said, I know everything. This is only the beginning. Ethan's hand started to shake. Later in the evening at Ivy's apartment, Ivy opened her door and found a package sitting outside. She picked it up and took it inside. When she opened it, her heart dropped. Inside were printed screenshots, messages between her and Ethan. She whispered, "Oh no," and ran to the window. No one was there. She found another envelope inside the box. It was labeled for HR. Her face turned pale. Her fingers trembled. Isabella's voice echoed in her mind. I wasn't just after Ethan. I wanted her to feel the same fear she made me feel, the fear of losing everything. Later that night, Isabella sat calmly, watching Ivy's tearful Instagram live on her laptop. Ivy tried to deny the affair. I never cheated. Ivy cried on the video, but the comments section was already filled with the screenshots Isabella had leaked. Isabella took a deep breath and whispered, one message, and the world turned on her, just like they'll turn on Ethan. Flashback. Isabella as a journalist years ago. Young Isabella stood with the MIC, talking to whistleblowers. She led secret investigations and helped bring down corrupt leaders. Before I became Mrs. Carter, Isabella once said, I was Isabella Cross, the reporter men in power feared. Now, Isabella sat alone, uploading audio files. In the recordings, Ethan could be heard talking about bribes and fraud. Isabella made sure her voice was edited out. Now, I am Athena, Isabella said softly. I don't report truth, I make it thunder. At night at Ethan's office, Ethan opened his briefcase. Inside, he found a small burner phone and a sticky note. The note read, I watched you lie. Now I'll make the world see. He ripped it apart with shaking hands. His breathing grew fast. At Isabella's hideout, Isabella sat in front of a wall of screens, watching news updates, social media posts, and live reports. Ethan's firm was falling apart. Staff were resigning. The internet was on fire. She sipped her tea, calm and steady. He buried me in lies, Isabella said quietly. But I rose with truth. You can't kill what you never truly understood. Later at night, Isabella sat in the dark, going through stolen financial records. Her eyes stopped at a strange payment labeled Project Orion. A small government logo was on the corner of the file. At first, it was just about Ethan, Isabella said to herself. The lies he told me, the betrayal I wore like a wedding ring. But this goes deeper. Isabella entered an old storage unit she used to share with Ethan. It was dusty and cold. She forced open a locked metal filing cabinet. "He thought I forgot this place," Isabella said. "But I never forget." Inside were hard drives, sealed folders, and an old burner phone. She looked through everything quickly. Among the files were blackmail photos, lists of corrupt judges, and a document marked Restricted, Gov Partner, Orion. Isabella remembered a moment 2 years ago when she walked into the kitchen late at night. Ethan was on the phone, speaking softly. He quickly hid the burner phone when he saw her. There were always signs, Isabella had thought then. But love made me doubt myself instead of him. Isabella stood in front of her wall of evidence. She pinned new photos and notes. The truth became clearer. Ethan's law firm was helping powerful people hide dirty money. They were using the same legal tricks Isabella once exposed as a journalist. "He's not just a liar," Isabella said quietly. "He's part of something that destroys truth and hides crimes." At a luxury hotel, Ethan sat across from a man in a dark suit. They spoke in low voices. "I think it's her," Ethan said. "Isabella. Somehow, she's still alive." The unknown man leaned closer. "Then finish what you started. We can't let this get out. You know what happens to loose ends." Isabella was listening. She had tapped their meeting room. Her hands tightened into fists as she heard Ethan speak. "I wanted justice," Isabella said. "But now, I need war." She opened a hidden drawer and looked at what was inside: a voice recorder, burner SIM cards, and a small gun. She picked it up slowly. "I never wanted to become this," Isabella said. "But they already tried to kill me once." Later that night, Isabella sat at her laptop. She logged into an encrypted forum using the name at Athena_reborn. She typed one message: "Project Orion is real. I have proof. Who wants to bring them down?" Within seconds, messages poured in. Hackers, journalists, and truth seekers from around the world replied. Isabella stood in front of her board. At the center was a photo of Ethan. Around it were pictures of government officials, Ivy, lawyers, and bank documents, all connected by red string. "I started this to catch a cheating husband," Isabella said. "But now, it's about the people they've hurt, the truth they've buried." She stepped back and stared at the board. "This isn't about me anymore," she said. "It's about all the people they crushed and the truth they fear." Early morning the next day, Isabella sat still. She watched as her face, blurred and anonymous, appeared on a digital expose titled Athena's Leaks Shake Legal System. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from resolve. "They said the truth was a weapon," Isabella said quietly. "They were right, and I've never been more ready to use it." She picked up a USB drive labeled Final Strike. At midday, Isabella walked into the newsroom disguised with a hoodie. She met Jordan, a sharp and bold investigative journalist she once mentored. "Everything you need is on this drive," Isabella said as she handed over the USB. "Names, accounts, evidence. No NDAs, no red tape. Just publish." Jordan looked at her closely and said in shock, "Isabella? My God, everyone thought you were dead." Isabella said, "No, just finally awake." That same day, Ethan walked past a group of reporters shouting questions. A judge had ordered a surprise audit of his law firm. Protesters stood nearby, holding signs that read, "Expose Project Orion and we believe Athena." "Mr. Carter, did you bribe judges to secure corporate deals?" a reporter asked. "We'll clear everything in court," Ethan said with a forced smile. But his eyes were dark. He was clearly unraveling. At night, Isabella sat and reviewed several leaked video files. In one video, Ethan admitted to ordering a hit on a witness. In another, Ivy was seen begging Ethan to leave the country. "This was never about heartbreak anymore," Isabella said. "This is about consequences." She opened a locker. Inside was the gun she once hesitated to use. Later at night, Ethan looked at his phone. A message popped up. "I'm not hiding anymore. Let's end this. Athena." A location was pinned, abandoned warehouse. At the abandoned warehouse, Isabella waited in the shadows. Ethan walked in, holding a gun. "You destroyed everything I built," Ethan said angrily. "You built it on lies, Ethan," Isabella said as she stepped out. "I just lit the match." "You don't have the guts to finish this," Ethan said. "No, Isabella said. But the truth will. Suddenly, bright spotlights turned on. FBI agents rushed in. Ethan turned around, stunned. Jordan and several press photographers stood behind the agents. "Ethan Carter, you're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and attempted murder," an FBI agent said. Ethan lunged toward Isabella, but she didn't flinch. The agents tackled him and put him in handcuffs. Cameras flashed all around. Isabella took off her hoodie. For the first time, she stood in the open, not anonymous anymore. "You're Athena. Why now?" a reporter asked. "Because the truth doesn't hide," Isabella said. "And neither do I." At the newsroom, Isabella sat at a desk, writing again. Her byline appeared after many years. The headline read, "The Reckoning, How One Woman Took Down a Corrupt Empire." "I lost everything the day I discovered his lies," Isabella said in voiceover. "But in the ruins, I rebuilt something stronger. My voice, my power, myself." The next morning, waves crashed gently near the shore. Isabella stood on the balcony as the morning light touched her face. Her expression was calm. She looked older, wiser. A laptop sat beside her. On the screen was a fresh document titled, Chapter 1, Rebirth. "They buried me beneath shame, silence, and lies," Isabella said in voiceover. "But I was never dead. I was becoming." The next day at the university lecture hall, Isabella stood in front of the class as a guest lecturer. The students listened to every word she said. "The truth doesn't knock politely," Isabella said. "It kicks down doors. Sometimes it costs everything, but silence costs more." The students clapped loudly. One young woman raised her hand. "How did you survive being erased?" the student asked. "By remembering I was never theirs to erase," Isabella said. After some months, Isabella paid a visit to the prison yard. Isabella sat across from Ethan. He looked like a shadow of the man he used to be. His eyes were empty and tired. "You ruined me," Ethan said. "No," Isabella said calmly. "You ruined yourself. I just stopped hiding your mess." "Do you still hate me?" Ethan asked. Isabella paused before answering. "No," Isabella said. "I outgrew you." She stood up to leave. Ethan looked down, defeated. Later at night, Isabella dreamed. She saw herself as a young woman, ambitious, in love, then betrayed, broken, and alone. Then she rose, powerful and free. She woke up in bed, smiling faintly. The next day, Isabella walked barefoot on the beach. In her hand, she held a letter addressed to the woman I used to be. She let the letter float into the sea. She was scared. She stayed quiet, Isabella said in voiceover. But she paved the road for me. And now, I walk it in her honor. At her study room that night, Isabella typed the final line of her new book. Then she closed the laptop and took a deep breath. She looked peaceful and empowered. "This isn't the end of my story," Isabella said in voiceover. "It's the beginning of living it on my terms." Isabella's story reminds us to never ignore the signs, because our intuition often sees the truth before our eyes do, and that women don't have to suffer in silence, because when we find our voice, we can transform pain into power and bring even the strongest empires to their knees.